Have you ever wondered what the longest chapter in the Bible is? Many might guess Genesis with its creation account, or perhaps Revelation with its vivid apocalyptic visions. But the answer may surprise you with Psalm 119, an extraordinary masterpiece of Hebrew poetry spanning 176 verses. But why would anyone write such an extensive meditation on God's Word? The answer lies in the fascinating story behind this remarkable psalm. Jerusalem, 586 BCE. The magnificent temple built by King Solomon lies in ruins. The city walls are demolished. The royal palace stands abandoned. Babylon's king Nebuchadnezzar has destroyed Jerusalem and forced its leading citizens into exile. In this moment of profound national trauma, an unknown Hebrew poet takes up his pen and creates what would become the longest chapter in the Bible, not as a lament of despair, but as a passionate declaration of hope found in God's eternal Word. Psalm 119 stands as a monument to divine wisdom in the midst of human chaos. This remarkable composition isn't just noteworthy for its length, it's a meticulously crafted acrostic poem where each of its 22 sections corresponds to a letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Each section contains exactly 8 verses, and every verse within that section begins with the same Hebrew letter. This elaborate structure wasn't merely artistic flourish, it represented the completeness of God's Word from Aleph to Tav, from A to Z, sufficient for every human need. Throughout human history, people have sought wisdom through various paths: philosophy, science, mysticism, and personal experience. Psalm 119 boldly proclaims that true wisdom begins with reverence for God's instructions. As verse 105 famously declares, "Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path." In a world before electricity, before streetlights and flashlights, imagine walking a rocky path in complete darkness. One misstep could lead to serious injury. A small oil lamp couldn't illuminate the entire journey, but it provided enough light for the next step. This powerful metaphor resonates across centuries. Divine guidance doesn't always reveal the entire future, but it illuminates the path directly before us. The historical context of Psalm 119 is crucial for understanding its urgency. Scholars generally date its composition to either the Babylonian exile, 586 to 538 BCE, or the post-exilic period when the Jewish people returned to a devastated homeland. During this dark chapter of Jewish history, the institutions that had defined their national identity, temple, monarchy, and homeland, were either destroyed or fundamentally altered. In this vacuum, the Torah, God's law, emerged as the central anchor of their identity and hope. The psalmist doesn't just admire God's instructions from a distance, he expresses a passionate, personal love for divine wisdom. Listen to verse 97. "Oh, how I love your law! I meditate on it all day long." This isn't the dry, academic study of religious regulations. It's a love affair with divine wisdom. The Hebrew word, Torah, often translated as law, actually means teaching or instruction. It's not merely restrictive commands, but life-giving guidance. Throughout Psalm 119, the author uses 8 different Hebrew words to describe God's revelation. 1. Torah, law, God's instruction and direction. 2. Edot, testimonies, God's witness to who He is. 3. Pekudim, precepts, detailed directions for specific situations. 4. Hukim, statutes, permanent, unchanging principles. 5. Mitzvot, commandments, divine authority expressed through commands. 6. Mishpatim, judgments, God's decisions about right and wrong. 7. Davar, word, God's communication to humanity. 8. Imra, saying, the specific content of God's promises. This rich vocabulary reveals the multifaceted nature of divine wisdom. It teaches, testifies, directs, establishes, commands, judges, speaks, and promises. The repetition of these terms throughout the psalm isn't redundancy, but emphasis on their comprehensive value. What makes Psalm 119 particularly powerful is that it wasn't composed in comfortable circumstances by someone with a perfect life. The psalmist writes from a place of profound struggle. In verse 67, he confesses, "Before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now I obey your word." In verse 71, he adds, "It was good for me to be afflicted so that I might learn your decrees." The author has discovered something counterintuitive, that suffering can become a classroom where divine wisdom is most deeply internalized. We find references to persecution throughout the psalm. In verse 23, the writer notes, "Though rulers sit together and slander me, your servant will meditate on your decrees." In verse 161, "Rulers persecute me without cause, but my heart trembles at your word." The exact nature of this persecution isn't specified, which actually makes the psalm more universally applicable across time and cultures. Whenever and wherever people face opposition for their faith, Psalm 119 gives voice to their experience. The practical application of divine wisdom stands at the heart of this psalm. The author doesn't seek knowledge for its own sake, but for transformation. "I have hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you," he writes in verse 11. This isn't superficial memorization, but deep internalization that shapes decisions and actions. Throughout the psalm, we see a progression from knowing God's instructions to loving them to living them out in daily choices. In April 1742, the renowned English evangelist George Whitefield wrote in his journal about Psalm 119, "No composition exceeds this in true sublimity, sweetness, and spirituality. I would recommend above all for young converts to learn by heart and repeat it often." Whitefield recognized what countless believers across centuries have discovered, that this psalm serves as a comprehensive guide to spiritual formation. What's particularly striking about Psalm 119 is its timelessness. Written approximately 2,500 years ago, in a cultural context vastly different from our own, its themes of seeking wisdom, finding purpose, and navigating life's challenges remain profoundly relevant. When the psalmist declares in verse 89, "Your word, Lord, is eternal. It stands firm in the heavens," he expresses confidence that divine wisdom transcends cultural and historical boundaries. We see this illustrated in how the psalm has been cherished across diverse faith traditions. Within Judaism, portions of Psalm 119 are recited during the Shavuot festival celebrating the giving of Torah at Mount Sinai. In Christian tradition, the psalm features prominently in monastic prayer offices, particularly in the night prayer service of Compline. Even beyond formal religious settings, the psalm's meditations on integrity, purpose, and ethical living have influenced literary and philosophical works throughout history. But what does this ancient Hebrew poem offer to our hyper-connected, information-saturated modern world? Perhaps more than ever, we need its guidance. In an era where opinions are abundant, but wisdom seems scarce, where information overload often leads to decision paralysis, Psalm 119 offers a clear path forward. The unfolding of your words gives light. It gives understanding to the simple. states verse 130. Consider this. The average person today consumes more information in a single day than someone in the 15th century might have encountered in their entire lifetime. According to a 2021 study by technology research firm IDC, the amount of data created, captured, copied, and consumed worldwide was estimated at 79 zettabytes, a number so large it's difficult to comprehend. Yet despite this abundance of information, surveys consistently show rising rates of anxiety, uncertainty, and moral confusion. Psalm 119 doesn't just offer information but transformation. Turn my eyes away from worthless things. Preserve my life according to your word. Praise the psalmist in verse 37. This prayer recognizes something we often forget, that what we choose to focus on shapes who we become. In our age of endless digital distractions, this ancient wisdom provides a corrective lens, helping us distinguish between what is merely interesting and what is truly important. The psalm also addresses the relationship between divine guidance and human freedom. Rather than presenting God's instructions as restrictive limitations, the psalmist declares in verse 45, I will walk about in freedom, for I have sought out your precepts. This paradoxical freedom found not in the absence of boundaries, but in living within wise ones offers a profound alternative to contemporary notions of liberty as unlimited personal autonomy. Perhaps most powerfully, Psalm 119 speaks to those experiencing seasons of doubt, confusion, or spiritual dryness. The psalmist doesn't present himself as someone who has perfectly mastered divine wisdom, but as a pilgrim still on the journey. I am laid low in the dust. Preserve my life according to your word, he cries in verse 25. My soul is weary with sorrow. Strengthen me according to your word, he adds in verse 28. These honest expressions of struggle have provided comfort to countless spiritual seekers across millennia. In the summer of 1527, as a deadly plague swept through Europe, German reformer Martin Luther found himself battling not just external threats, but internal darkness. In what he later described as his most severe period of spiritual depression, Luther turned repeatedly to Psalm 119, finding in its verses a lifeline of hope. This psalm has been of special service to me, he later wrote, and it has come to my aid amid the manifold necessities of my life. The geographical setting of Psalm 119 adds another dimension to its meaning. The Holy Land, with its stark contrasts between fertile valleys and barren wilderness, between life-giving water sources and parched deserts, provides the backdrop for the psalmist's reflections. When he declares in verse 176, I have strayed like a lost sheep, he invokes imagery familiar to anyone who had witnessed shepherds searching the Judean hillsides for wayward members of their flocks. Archaeological discoveries from ancient Israel help illuminate the cultural context of the psalm. Excavations from sites dating to the 6th century BC reveal homes containing small niches where Torah scrolls would have been kept, physical evidence of how central these sacred texts had become to daily life. The psalmist's declaration, 7 times a day I praise you for your righteous laws, verse 164, reflects the rhythm of regular prayer and scripture reading that structured the days of devout Jews. The transmission history of Psalm 119 itself represents an extraordinary achievement. For centuries before the invention of printing, scribes meticulously copied this text by hand, preserving its acrostic structure and complex patterns. When comparing the psalm as found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, dating from around 100 BC, with modern editions, we find remarkable consistency, testimony to the careful preservation of this sacred wisdom. The psalm has been translated into more than 3,000 languages worldwide, making its wisdom accessible across diverse cultures. Each translation brings its own nuances. For example, in the Inuit language of Greenland, verse 105's famous lamp metaphor is rendered in terms of seal oil lamps illuminating Arctic darkness. In Swahili translations used throughout East Africa, the psalm's agricultural metaphors resonate deeply in rural communities. The practice of memorizing portions of Psalm 119 has a long and meaningful history. In medieval Jewish communities, children would often begin their religious education by memorizing the Aleph section, verses 1 to 8, before progressing through the rest of the psalm as their studies advanced. Similarly, early Christian monastic communities incorporated regular recitation of the psalm into their daily prayer routines. This tradition of memorization fulfills the psalmist's own practice as described in verse 11. I have hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. The Hebrew concept of heart, lev, encompasses not just emotions but intellect and will the core of a person's being. When divine instruction is internalized at this level, it shapes our instinctive responses to life's challenges. Throughout Psalm 119, we find not just personal devotion, but also a commitment to sharing divine wisdom with others. I will speak of your statutes before kings and will not be put to shame, declares verse 46. Let me live that I may praise you, and may your laws sustain me, adds verse 175. The psalmist understands that wisdom is meant to be lived and shared, not hoarded as private knowledge. This communal dimension of the psalm reflects the fundamentally social nature of Hebrew wisdom traditions. Unlike some philosophical systems that envision enlightenment as an individual achievement, biblical wisdom flourishes in community. The psalm's repeated references to teaching and testimony remind us that divine guidance isn't just for personal benefit, but for the flourishing of society. One of the most remarkable aspects of Psalm 119 is its universal accessibility. While some biblical texts require extensive historical or theological background to appreciate fully, the Psalm's reflections on seeking wisdom, making good choices, and finding purpose in life resonate across educational levels, social classes, and cultural backgrounds. We see this universal appeal in how the psalm has influenced people from vastly different circumstances. In the 1670s, English tinker and preacher John Bunyan found comfort in Psalm 119 during his 12-year imprisonment for unauthorized preaching. Nearly 3 centuries later, in the 1950s, Albanian nun Mother Teresa would recite portions of the psalm during her work among the destitute in Calcutta's slums. From prison cells to palaces, the psalm's wisdom has transcended social boundaries. The ethical framework presented in Psalm 119 deserves particular attention. In verse 36, the psalmist prays, "Turn my heart toward your statutes, and not toward selfish gain." This recognition of how easily our moral compass can be distorted by self-interest offers a timeless warning. The prayer continues in verse 37. "Turn my eyes away from worthless things. Preserve my life according to your word." Here we see acknowledgement of how distractions can gradually erode our ethical foundations. When faced with pressure to compromise, the psalmist finds courage in divine principles. "I will speak of your statutes before kings, and will not be put to shame." Verse 46. When tempted by what seems expedient rather than right, he reminds himself, "The wicked have set a snare for me, but I have not strayed from your precepts." Verse 110. These verses offer a framework for ethical decision-making that transcends situational ethics. The devotional aspects of Psalm 119 have nourished spiritual practices across faith traditions for millennia. Its emphasis on meditation. I meditate on your precepts and consider your ways. Verse 15 has influenced contemplative traditions from Jewish Kabbalah to Christian monasticism to Islamic Sufi practices. The psalm presents meditation not as escapism, but as deep engagement with wisdom that shapes action. We also find in the psalm a profound theology of suffering. Rather than viewing hardship as evidence of divine abandonment, the psalmist recognizes its potential for spiritual growth. Before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now I obey your word. Verse 67. This perspective has provided comfort to countless people navigating life's inevitable sorrows, helping them find meaning in experiences that might otherwise seem senseless. As we conclude our exploration of this remarkable psalm, let's return to its historical context. Written during one of the darkest chapters of ancient Israel's history, when national institutions had collapsed and the future seemed uncertain, Psalm 119 stands as a testament to the enduring power of divine wisdom. The temple could be destroyed, the monarchy overthrown, the land occupied by foreign powers, but God's word remained an unshakable foundation. In our own uncertain times, when established institutions face unprecedented challenges and traditional sources of security seem increasingly fragile, this ancient wisdom offers a path forward. Not a simplistic path that denies life's complexities, but one that acknowledges them while providing reliable guidance. Not a rigid set of rules, but a living relationship with divine wisdom that illuminates each step of life's journey. Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path. In a world of shifting shadows and uncertain footing, may we all discover the illuminating power of timeless wisdom, not just to know, but to love, and ultimately to live. Before you go, I want to personally invite you to be part of our growing community here at Prayer Universe. If this video touched your heart or brought you peace, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a prayer or message that can uplift your spirit. But most importantly, I'd love to hear from you. In the comments below, share just one word or phrase of motivation that this video inspired in you, whether it's hope, gratitude, peace, or something else. Your words matter deeply to us because they help guide the content we create for this channel. Together, let's build a space filled with faith, encouragement, and connection. Thank you for being here, and remember, every prayer counts. See you in the next one.